Agave Utahensis is the best agave species. Obviously, I'm biased because I'm a huge Agave Utahensis nerd and I live here in Agave Utahensis habitat, but even this year out at Intercity, a huge cactus and succulent show, a really cool looking Agave Utahensis won best agave at that show. So that's what we're talking about today in this video, is why Agave Utahensis is the best agave. So the first reason that Agave Utahensis is the best agave is actually a really well-known fact about Agave Utahensis, and that is that it's the most cold hardy species of agave. It's the most northern occurring agave of the entire genus Agave, and it can withstand the coldest temperatures. And a lot of its range, actually way up in the mountains, it spends a lot of the winter actually covered in a blanket of snow. And in fact, the Department of Energy, the US Department of Energy, did some research into it as a potential source of biofuel. And in that research, they found that not only is it the most cold hardy form of agave, but it's actually cold hardy down to negative 23 degrees Celsius, which is negative 9 degrees Fahrenheit. And that means that in the US, it's cold hardy down to zones 6 and maybe even 5. And in cold, rainy England, it's been awarded the Royal Horticultural Society's Award of Garden Merit because of how well it does in the cold and rainy gardens there. So being the most cold hardy agave, it can live in a lot of places that other agave species can't. I think that's a huge reason why Utahensis is the best agave. Now, the second reason that it's the best agave is that it's got the most variation. Right? In his book, Agaves of Continental North America, legendary agave botanist Howard Scott Gentry actually says that variability is a species trait of Agave Utahensis. So if you go to see these agave in habitat, whether it's regular Utahensis, subspecies Cababensis, Nevadensis, or Aboraspina, there are plants that look super different from each other growing right next to each other in habitat, right? You can go and you can see Nevadensis plants, for instance, that have really short, straight spines, and then right next to it will be plants with really wavy spines. And then you'll even see some really, really unique plants, like I found a couple of months ago when I went out into the field with Kelly Griffin, and we found a plant that has almost sort of fringed spines. And Aboraspina is even really crazier when it comes to that variation, right? Because you can find, these super long spines. You can see merged spines. You can see some wavy spines. There's ivory white, all white spines. There's spines with black and brown banding on it in addition to the white, etc. So again, another reason why Agave Utahensis is the best agave is because of its variability. The third reason why Agave Utahensis is the best agave is because it's got a super interesting history. Now, humans have been using all forms of agave, all sorts of agave, for thousands and thousands of years. And, most famously, probably Agave tequiliana, blue agave down in Mexico for making tequila. Some of the other varieties that grow there for making mezcal, or agaves that are used for sisal, which is fiber essentially, of course all have really interesting histories. But I think the history of Agave Utahensis is also super duper fascinating, right? It's been used here in the Las Vegas area for thousands of years, and as far east as the Grand Canyon for a similar amount of time. And it's been used for everything from food to fiber, and there's a long documented history. There's a lot of documentation about that history, about how that use was done. And I have a bunch of content coming soon about indigenous use of Agave Utahensis and the incredible harvesting practices that were done and the way that it was cooked and roasted in these giant earthen roasting pits. And you can actually still see these giant earthen roasting pits throughout its range today. So I think that's yet another reason, the third reason why Agave Utahensis is the best agave, and that's because of its super interesting history. The fourth reason that Agave Utahensis is the best agave is because it's got the coolest spines, right? Particularly Aboraspina, but even Nevadensis has the longest, I think, spine to leaf ratio. Aboraspina does, meaning that its spines, its terminal spines, in a lot of cases are longer, or if not longer than they're at least as long as the actual leaf is of the agave plant, of the rosette itself. And that's fairly rare even in the agave genus, across the agave genus. So, and those spines are not only long, they can be merged, right? So I've shown plants like this before on the channel where the terminal spine merges, is really wide, and it merges into the teeth spines, which are just another kind of spine. They just grow on the margins of the leaf. And in some cases, those spines are really wavy. Sometimes they can even be spiral and kind of loop back on each other. I have a bunch of these that I've grown from seed myself personally. And in other cases, they're just sort of wavy, as the plant that won Best Agave at Intercity this year has super wavy spines. So again, the fourth reason why Agave Utahensis is the coolest, is the best agave, is because it's got the coolest spines. The fifth reason why Agave Utahensis is the best agave is because it's blue. And there are other agave species that are blue, but then when you add up the blue color to all the other things that I'm talking about today, that those other blue agave species don't have, I think that's a good argument to be made. There's a good argument to be made there that Agave Utahensis is the coolest agave. And we've talked about on this channel before why that blue coating exists on Agave Utahensis. Essentially, it's a glaucous, it's a powdery or waxy coating that covers the leaves to shield it from UV stress, because of course Agave Utahensis lives way up in the mountains, up at altitude, where it's exposed to a lot more UV stress. But beyond the biology or the botany of why it's got that blue coloration, I just think that blue plants are super duper cool looking, right? I mean, I think that's part of the reason why everybody loves Copiapoa, the cactus Copiapoa, is because it can be blue or even gray. I think Agave Utahensis, especially Nevadensis, that grows way up high at altitude, gets a ton of UV stress, and develops these super blue leaves, is just super duper cool looking, right? And I don't think there's a whole lot cooler agave. You can sit on your windowsill or in your house somewhere under a light, and it'll have that blue coloration, and it's just so fascinating looking. And so that's another reason. That's the fifth reason why Agave Utahensis is the best agave. And speaking of growing Agave Utahensis in your house, the sixth reason why Agave Utahensis is the best agave is because it's small. It's actually one of the smallest, if not the smallest, agave species in general. And the reason that its small size, makes it the coolest agave, makes it the best agave, is because exactly that. You can grow it in your house. There are a lot of other agave species that are super cool, but they're way too big to be growing indoors inside your house, right? And so because it's so small, I mean, you can grow it outside, of course, and it makes a great landscaping plant. Because of its size, again, you can put it in really remarkable places outside, but having an agave with that super cool spines, its super cool blue leaves, giving it a really awesome aesthetic, bringing that outdoors, that desert, Mojave Desert vibes inside your house in a small little pot, you can make it grow with pretty compact leaves, and oh man, it just looks really, really cool at its small size. So that's another reason. That's a sixth reason why Agave Utahensis is the best agave. And the final reason that we're going to talk about in this video, the seventh reason why Agave Utahensis is the best agave, is totally different than the other ones. It's not to do with its history or its use in cultivation. It's cool looks in cultivation. It's cool aesthetic in cultivation, or some trait about it growing. It's about one of the chemicals, or a class of the chemicals that it produces inside the plant itself, and those are steroidal saponins, right? And I might be mispronouncing that, but there has been a ton of research into these, and of course Agave Utahensis is not the only natural source for this class of chemicals, but it is one of the most abundant natural sources for this class of chemicals, and it's a drought tolerant one, so it will be able to be grown in the future, as desertification and stuff continues with climate change. But the important part about these steroidal saponins, this class of chemicals, is that there is a ton of research that's gone into them for a variety of medical purposes, anti-inflammation and things like that. But I think most interestingly, it's cancer-fighting properties. In fact, there was just a recent article that was published in the Journal of Natural Medicine just a little while ago that looks into these steroidal glycosides, which is, I guess, another name for a steroidal saponin, or some steroidal saponins are steroidal glycosides. I'm not a medical researcher, so I may be butchering those names a little bit, but the idea that this super cool looking plant with this amazing history is also potentially a source of cancer fighting chemicals is just absolutely phenomenal. And I think that's the final reason that we're talking about today of why Agave Utahensis is the best agave. So I want to hear from you down in the comments. Why do you think Agave Utahensis is the best agave? Did I miss any reasons, or am I misspoken? Am I mistaken? Or is there another agave that's even cooler? I'm probably going to disagree with you, but I would love to hear about it down in the comments, and thanks for watching.